All right, good morning, folks. It's time to get started here in our meeting. Call the meeting to order. We have a roll call, please, Ms. Haley.
Chairman Hayes,
Present.
Vice Chairman Rogers,
There he is.
Mayor Holden,
Here.
Victor Lay,
Here.
Dr. Martin,
Here.
Mayor Priest, here. Todd Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Tharp,
Here.
Mayor Warner.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Item number one, approval of minutes of the board meeting of December 16, 2020. Motion made by
Second.
Victor Lay. There's a second by Mike Warner. Any discussion? All for the motion, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign, motion pass. Item number two, investments annual review. Turn that over to Mr. Fan and Mr. Captain.
I'll go ahead and Amanda, if you want to introduce Cody for this report, and maybe talk a little bit about what this is for.
Yeah, Callan has done an independent review of our investment portfolio the last several years, and Cody Chapman is going to kind of just, we send him all of our investments at the end of the year, and he just does a review and kind of looks at it versus market to see kind of how our performance is doing. So that's what he's going to address. You've got it's in tab 2 of your booklet, but you also have a separate bound copy here too. And then there's another attachment that he will go over, I believe, at the end of his presentation. It's a just the little staple packet here. So all of that kind of goes together for the investment review. So I'll turn it over to Cody.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nice to see you all virtually. Last year I was supposed to be with you all in person and had a bit of a family emergency at the last minute. So you may remember that my colleague, Bill Emmett, presented in my behalf. So hate to not be there with you all in person again this year, but I'm certainly looking forward to it next year, hopefully. But
hang on a second. We're having some sound issues. Hang on just a second.
We're having some technical difficulty here. I don't know if the TV volume is up.
Is that what it is?
Okay, that's what it sounds like when I have my surround sound on and the TV volume on at the same time, so. Bingo. Okay, Cody, if you don't, Mr. Callan, if you don't care to start from the top, we would appreciate it. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's perfectly fine.
Oh, yeah.
Is that better?
Yes, take off.
All right, perfect. All right, well, as you all know, we do this annual update. Again, sorry not to be with you there in person with the scheduling conflict, but excited to be with you virtually and to catch up with you all for a few minutes. But as was mentioned, this is an annual review that we've done for a number of years now for your investment portfolio. Really just a way to summarize your results over the last year, give you some relevant market benchmarks, a little bit of commentary about what happened in the market broadly, and then to tell you a little bit about what we're expecting for the coming year, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have. So I believe you have the executive summary in front of you. That's the book we'll be going through, but maybe just a couple of comments more broadly about the markets. You all are well aware that the first quarter of 2020 was rather tumultuous. Saw pretty significant declines in equity markets starting really in February of last year, continuing into March when markets bottomed towards the end of March. And subsequently, the S&P 500 actually was up about 70% through the end of 2020. So when you added it all up, there was a lot of volatility throughout the year, but actually a pretty good year for equity markets broadly. That's probably what you're more familiar with in the news, but more relevant to this portfolio is what's been going on in the fixed income markets, so in the bond world. And some pretty interesting developments in the bond world. As incredible as returns were in the equity markets, really equally surprising was the returns that we saw from the bond market. Interest rates have been very low, really since the great financial crisis of 2008. We've been in an extended period of relatively low interest rates, and saw declines even further in 2020. So particularly in the first quarter, we saw a very significant decline in bond yields really across the board. When bond yields go down, bond prices go up. So the decline in bond yields that we saw in the first quarter and really into the second quarter was a very significant tailwind for bonds throughout much of 2020. Rates stabilized a little bit at fairly low levels towards the end of the year, and actually have started to rise a little bit in 2021. But that tailwind for bonds was very helpful to your portfolio, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But bonds, as measured by the Bloomberg Aggregate Index, were actually up about 7.5% in 2020, which is quite a bit higher than really what any market forecasters had expected for 2020, and quite a bit higher than what we have in our 10-year capital market expectations as well, which I'll talk about at the end of the report. But if there aren't any questions about the market more broadly, we can talk about your portfolio in just a little bit of detail. So this is the executive summary that was shared with you all. I'm going to go off PDF page numbers, but should be, let's see here, page 2 of the hard copy has a pie chart of where your allocation was as of 12/31. So if you go to that page, you can see right at about 312 million in total assets for this portfolio. About 90% of that is in bonds and similar fixed income securities, and then about 9.7% in cash. So about 30 million in cash, about 281 million in bonds. So if you move forward to the next page, that's page 3 of the hard copies. We'll take a look at your returns. So very good year. Again, as we mentioned, you can see there, we show 1 through 5 year returns here. Your total portfolio was up about 8.45%. So a very good result relative to that Barclays aggregate return that we mentioned of 7.5%. We also show a few other indices here for some relevant details based on how your portfolio is constructed, but some other indices that are of interest. The Muni index there at about 5.2% and the agency index at about 5.5%. So when you look at just what your bond portfolio did, so if we stripped out the cash component, that's that fixed income line that you see there. On the second line, the 9.2%. So very good results for your bond portfolio overall, as well as the total portfolio at about, again, 8.5%. Looking out over the longer term, 3 and 5 year results continue to be very good as well. So the total portfolio was up about 6.3% for the last 3 years. Just the fixed income portfolio was up about 6.9%. That was very favorable versus all of the indices that you see here on this page. The aggregate index up about 5.3% for that same period. Is probably the most relevant indicator. And then over the last 5 years, your portfolio is up about 5.3% versus the aggregate index up 4.4%. So reasonably good returns relative to the Barclays aggregate. index, as well as all these other indices that you see here. Going forward, we'll talk about this again in just a minute, but we think just where yields are starting today, it may be a little bit more challenging to get to these types of results with a pure fixed income portfolio. If you want to move forward just to page 5 of the PDF, we'll quickly just give you some context for what other fixed income portfolios look like. So these gray bars, those of you that have been in this meeting before may remember some of this, but the gray bars that you see in this chart just represent the range of returns that we see from other fixed income portfolios. There's a good bit of differentiation here, and you see some pretty diverse ranges of returns. A lot of that is affected by the amount of credit in a portfolio. So the amount of things like corporate bonds, as well as the duration of the portfolio. So how much interest rate risk is taken in the portfolio. So your portfolio compares favorably pretty much across the board. So that blue dot that you see on the page for the last year at 9.2% is your fixed income portfolio, ranking in the 28th percentile of peers. So you outperformed 72% of your peers. That's a very good result, given how this portfolio is structured and the macroeconomic backdrop. Very encouraging results there. Longer term, very good results as well. You can see ranking in similar ranges relative to peers for a lot of these periods, 3 years in the 20th percentile and 5 years in the 35th percentile. So compared to what other investors are getting from their fixed income portfolios, you all compare relatively favorably over time. You may be asking, what's been driving that? We can go to page 7 and talk about how the portfolio is constructed, and I think that is informative of, it informs a lot of the performance. So your portfolio is largely in munis, some corporate securities, as well as some government-related securities, so what we would call agencies. So if you look towards the middle of the page there, you can see that your duration is about 8.5 years of your portfolio versus the agency index at about 3.7 years. So duration is a fairly straightforward statistic, but essentially it's a proxy for interest rate risk. When bond yields are coming down, having more duration than the benchmark is helpful. So you all have benefited from having a bit longer of duration in your portfolio. There is the potential that if rates rise in the coming years, that duration being longer than this Bloomberg agency index may be a bit of a headwind relative to some of the market benchmarks. So just something to keep in mind there. The other thing that has benefited your portfolio towards the bottom of the page is just the quality distribution. This is again relative to the Bloomberg agency index, but reasonably high quality portfolio overall. You can see about 24% in AAA securities, about 60% in AA, and about 14% in single A. So one of the things that we saw throughout the majority of the year was that taking on some exposure to lower quality securities. And again, AA and single A are investment grade ratings, but are considered lower grade than, again, that AAA. But taking on lower relative quality was rewarded during the year, particularly as we came out of the lockdown and some of the shutdowns that we saw throughout the country. Really the second and the third quarter, and even into the fourth quarter, lower quality exposure was rewarded on a relative basis. So let me stop there and see what questions you might have about the performance of this portfolio.
All right, board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Kelly and what he's discussed so far? Okay, hearing none, continue on, please.
Certainly. So that concludes my remarks relative to your portfolio. One of the things that may be of interest to you all, I believe that you all have the other handout that's titled Callan's 2021 to 2030 Capital Markets Assumptions. This is a really interesting piece that we put together every year. So for our client base, we generally think about 10-year planning horizons. Now, certainly for some projects, it's shorter, for some it's longer, but 10 years is kind of where we kind of set our base case. And to do a lot of that work, we need to have capital market expectations for all of the major asset classes. So an expectation for return, an expectation for risk in the form of standard deviation, and then also an expectation for correlation. So how do asset classes move with each other, relative to each other? So it's a fairly complicated exercise. We've been doing it for better than 40 years now. So it's a blend of art and science, really. As we make these, looking at forward expectations is inherently uncertain. We try to go back and look and see, what assumptions we made 10 years ago, how did those play out? How could we have done better and tweak those over time? Generally, I think what we found is that, any single asset class can be fairly challenging to get exactly right over a 10-year period. But when we look at, total portfolio expectations, so if you combine those expectations into how institutional investors are building their portfolios, these have generally come out reasonably accurate. So where we may miss a little bit on U.S. equity, a little bit too high, might be a little bit too low on bond returns, for instance, and over time, those kind of even out. So I believe you have this full document in front of you. I won't go through all of it. I know you all have a busy agenda. It's an interesting read for those of you that are interested. A lot of detail on what we saw in 2020, as well as the things we're thinking about when we're building our expectations going forward. So again, some good details here for reading at your leisure. Most interesting to this portfolio is probably the U.S. fixed income piece, and that starts on page 8. But really, the page that I'll take you to is just quickly page 11, and this has an exhibit 3, Callan's capital market assumptions for 2021 to 2030. You can see here all of the major asset classes that we project, return as well as risk. There's also a correlation matrix that it plays a role in this, but I'll just highlight a couple of things here that might be of interest. So large cap U.S. equities, last year we had projected at 7.5%. We've brought that down to 6.5%. That reflects fairly high starting valuations. You all, as we mentioned earlier, and you all are likely aware, 2020 was a very good year for equity markets. A lot of that was a rebound in earnings, but there was also some changes in multiple expansion. So what that means is our starting point for 2021 is fairly high valuation. So that impacts what we expect on a projected return basis somewhat going forward. So again, we did bring down those equity projections from 7.5% to 6.5%. We made similar reductions in projected return for number of asset classes, or a majority of equity. So that global ex-US and developed ex-US line items, both of those came down 50 basis points as well. And then emerging markets came down about 40 basis points. Probably the most relevant to you all, though, is towards the middle there. You can see there's a fixed income tab, and that core US fixed, as measured by the Bloomberg Barclays aggregate. You can see there that we have a projected forward return of about 1.75%. So we talked about this a bit earlier, but when we think about a 10-year return expectation for core US fixed income, really our starting point is what's the 10-year treasury yield? Because if you bought that treasury, held it to maturity for 10 years, what you would get is that yield essentially. You all are likely aware, but for the majority of 2020, the 10-year treasury yield was well below 1%, hovered in the 70 to 90 basis point range for most of the year. Actually got quite a bit lower than that at the peak of the pandemic, kind of in April through June range. Was below 50 basis points even, but actually has moved a bit higher to start 2021. It's actually around 1.3% more recently. But just given how low treasury yields are, that's kind of our starting point for yields going forward. So not expecting that you all will get a lot. Well, any fixed income investor will get a lot out of a bond portfolio over the next 10 years. The starting point for yields is fairly low. And we also expect that interest rates are going to rise at some point over that 10-year horizon. So when rates are rising, that's a bit of a headwind for bond prices. However, long-term, rising rates is actually a good thing for long-term investors like you all. If you can get more out of your fixed income portfolio, that benefits you all. If rates move higher, you're able to get more out of your fixed income portfolio, and that benefits you all as investors, even if in the short run, it can be a bit of a headwind to returns. So all that to say, our expectations for fixed income over the next 10 years are fairly low. Not to say that necessarily anything needs to be done differently with this portfolio. You all have done a good job of building it, certainly different than this Barclays aggregate, but relative to your portfolio, we think this is the most relevant comparison is the Barclays aggregate. So just did want to highlight that we do expect fairly subdued returns for the asset class going forward. But again, rising rates ultimately is beneficial to you all. So not necessarily a bad thing over the long run. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions about our capital market expectations.
Any questions from board members about the capital market? No questions at this time, Mr. Kelly.
Okay. Well, that concludes my remarks. Certainly happy to answer any questions that may come up. Again, sorry to miss you all in person. Look forward to seeing you next year in person, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we appreciate the partnership we have with you guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
All right.
Be well.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept this investment report.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Mayor Priest, second by Mayor Mike Warner. Any discussion? All for the motion, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign, motion pass. Item number 3, strategic plan status report. Mr. Fan, Mr. Dalton, Ms. Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick word for me, then I want George and Haley to chime in on kind of the other activity of our leadership team. Just a quick summary, even though you're fully aware, the board, after kind of working through the preliminary work that our leadership team had done, the board fine-tuned that at the executive retreat work session, and then formally adopted and passed the strategic plan in December. We have continued to work on our strategic initiatives and defining those things in the last couple of months. If you didn't notice as you came in, we have changed our stairwell sign to reflect the vision and mission and values that this board adopted, and are just very excited about that. I guess, George, if you would maybe talk just a little bit about what we've done since January 1.
Sure, thank you. Good morning. As Mike said, I'm George Dalton, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you about this. Just want to share with you very quickly, the second phase of our planning and development for our department was to work with Judy King in developing our key performance indicators by department. And as you all are KPIs for a better term, and as you all are probably aware, key performance indicators are qualitative and quantitative measures designed to measure our effectiveness and our efficiency towards meeting specific goals that we set for ourselves as individual departments. And what these key performance indicators will help us do, it will help us be a little more focused in on what's important and be more responsive to any changes that we need to make if we're not meeting the goals or reaching the goals that we want. We will measure these on a regular basis, look at them on a monthly basis, and just kind of see how we're doing in comparison to the goals that we set for ourselves. And if we see that we're a little behind in terms of the goals that we set for ourselves, it allows us the opportunity to reset our course as a result of where we are. So again, very good program, very good process to have in place. We follow the SMART method, which makes sure that our goals are specific, measurable, obtainable, relevant to what we do, and that they are indeed timely. In the second phase of that, which we will start beginning the second week of March, we will meet with Judy King as an organization, as a leadership team, and begin to start developing our key performance indicators based upon our strategic plan that we set for ourselves. The key thing that we want to do with that is to ensure that our key performance indicators are in alignment with those the elements we set forth in our strategic plan. Once again, it will allow us to be focused on the items that we set forth that are important to us and that this board has helped us make good decisions on in terms of what's important to us, and allow us to be more responsive to the needs of our organization and our members. And again, this is a great program. It's something that we've never done before. And again, it allows us to see where we are. It helps us to see where we are in terms of where we're trying to go as an organization. So this is a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to what we've developed so far and what we're going to do in the future. Okay.
Just one additional thing, George, to kind of couple with our key performance indicators, we've scheduled some fundamental, basic kind of training for our supervisors and our leadership team. I think that starts this next week.
Yes, sir. On the 5th. Yes, sir. We sure do it. So we want to talk about that.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. Any questions?
Anything at all for George? And of course, Haley, as our director of communication, has been responsible for kind of our public or external rollout. So Haley, if you would kind of talk a little bit about what you've done there.
So in addition to all the work that's been going on internally, something that's really important is making sure that we get that messaging out to members. So since the board meeting in December, we focused on rolling strategic plan out to our membership through our annual report, which each of you have a copy of in front of you. The theme of that is values and vision, and it talks about our vision, our mission, and those priorities that each of you as board members voted to focus our organization on. We also partnered with the League in Tennessee County and City to put that messaging in one of the January issues of Tennessee Town and City, and roll that out also through our newsletter. And we'll continue to focus on our vision and our values and the internal work that's being done to continue that strategic plan and make sure that it's an integral part of not only what we do internally, but shared out with our members.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions of Haley? I really want to give really the entire team, as we have remained diligent to this plan since you adopted it in December, and I know when we distributed the PDF file of our annual report before we had it printed, I think we received 3 or 4 folks around the office that I think it may be the best annual report we've ever put together. And we tried to simplify, and we stayed true to our message of, as Haley said, of vision and values. And we're just very excited about that. Thank you both. And this does not, it's just a matter of information.
Yeah, it's, well, thank you. I know that I hope, I think I joined several of us in saying that what a good strategic planning session that we had with Ms. King. I thought she done a great job guiding through that. So a lot came of it, and I'm glad to see that we're moving to implement those things that we talked about. Item number 4, financial aid, financial reports, not financial aid, financial reports. I'm going back to my old college days. I needed a lot of it. All right, financial statements, approval of the financial statements, September 30th, 2020. I guess we need to do these one at a time, Haley, or do you think we can do them all at once?
One at a time, because we've got especially the dividend on the end.
All right, okay, Mr. Fan.
I know you guys all had it emailed out to you.
Right.
Do you have, do you have any questions or anything?
I had some questions, but I called Michael and we worked it out.
Yeah, the September 30th financials that we discussed at our December meeting, we were still working on some reconciliation of some claim payments, and of course claims are our biggest expense. So we didn't want to give you an inaccurate report, and so we mailed those. I think emailed those out the first week of January, and so you've had those. They are reprinted again at tab 4 for September 30th. But and I know Amanda put together some comments that we emailed out with those. So you had that, but we'll be happy to cover any of that you would like for us to, but we will need to, as a board.
We'll vote on them individually then. Okay, is there any questions about the financial statements, September 30th, 2020? Okay, if there's no question, I'll entertain a motion to approve the financial statement, September 30th, 2020. Is there a motion? Okay, motion made by Todd Smith. Is there a second? Second by Sam Tharp. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner. Mayor Warner, you're muted.
Yep.
Mayor Warner, you're still muted. Can you unmute yourself and provide unmute?
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp.
Aye.
Todd Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Victor Lay.
Aye.
Mayor Holden. Vice Chair Brundage.
Aye.
Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion pass. Under 4B, financial statements, December 31st, 2020. You've had an opportunity to review them. Is there any questions about Any of those? If there's no question, we entertain a motion to approve the financial statements December 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Motion made by Victor Lay
Second.
and second. Thank you. Second by Dr. Crystal Martin. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp.
Aye.
Todd Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Aye. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Victor Lay,
Aye.
Mayor Holden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage, Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion approved. Financial reports, C, investment report, January 31st, 2021.
Amanda, do you have comments you want to make?
Just to kind of do a little recap of our investments at 131. We held 18 securities with a book value of $284.2 million, showing an unrealized gain of $5 million. I will say that over the course of February, that has declined quite dramatically. We were at like a $3.7 million loss. We do look for that. We had a treasury sell-off yesterday that didn't go so well. So we do see it coming back next week, but we have taken a big drop in our values here within just the last couple of weeks. But our average coupon is a 3.56 with a yield of 2.96, and we usually shoot for that 3%, which Cody talked a lot about that we had about $95 million of agency, which are the AAA less risk securities called from us last year, and in order to reinvest that money to get those yields, we can't go back to AAA because then now we're getting 1.5 to 1.7%. So that is where you've seen kind of the drop off of, going from AAA to double A to more A securities in our portfolio. We feel like we're still in a very good spot. It's just, we're having to kind of do that balancing act between yield and kind of our credit quality in our portfolio. So as of 131, we still show realized gains of 3.7 for the year since July 1st. And that's up approximately 1.9 million from this time last year. So if you have any questions about, you have the full report of what we were holding as of 131. So if you have any questions.
Any questions? It's like Charles Moore's trying If there's no questions from us, Ron, we'll entertain a motion to pass the investment report January 31, 2021.
So moved. So moved.
Motion made by Mayor Mike Warner. Is there a second? Second by Todd Smith. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp,
Aye.
Todd Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Aye. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Victor Lay,
Aye.
Mayor Holden.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage, Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion passed. Item 4D, dividend recommendation, fiscal year 2022. Mr. Fan?
Yes, this, I'll ask John if he will to, John, I'll ask Amanda to cover this, got my wires crossed.
You just threw him a curveball, man. He's like,
I'll throw myself a curveball. I was thinking Amanda, and I looked up, made eye contact with John, said his name. Just down my eyesight. But at this, as is our tradition, This meeting is where we evaluate kind of our holdings and our excess, our reserves and so forth. And I really want to credit Amanda and her team for the work that they've done in crunching the numbers, making sure that we knew exactly kind of where we ended up with our audited financials from last year on June 30. And we looked at a pretty wide range of possibilities as to what we would recommend to this board for the dividend to return if we needed one, and if we could return a dividend to our membership beginning on July 1. So Amanda, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the numbers.
Basically, what we did in kind of analyzing is to go back and look to see how our change in net position had kind of come up over the last 5 years, and to compare that against what dividends, that we have given back over the last few years. And, also taking into consideration that capital reserve study that we did have 3 years ago, it gave us a range of where we kind of wanted to be as a pool, where we needed to be on a reserve. And, not wanting to be way on the conservative side, but we definitely don't want to hit the lower end. So we came to a $7.5 million dividend recommendation between the executive team, and still feel like that keeps us in a good, solid position with our capital reserve study.
So the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is a $7.5 million dividend to return to our members, distributed among 3 pools, beginning July 1.
Okay, and is that the largest one we've ever done?
No, last year you approved a $14 million dividend, and then later declared an emergency relief dividend through the pandemic. So last year was but this will be one of our top 5 dividends we've ever given back.
That's great, and I'm sure by next meeting we'll get a list.
You will.
Yeah.
As soon as the board approves this, then we will definitely report to each of you what your piece of that will be, and we'll have the numbers for our entire membership.
Absolutely, and I think the dividend program that we do here is just excellent. But I just want everyone, all the board members, understand this is something that we want to do, that we don't have to do, but is a step of giving back to our customers that deserve it and work hard for it. And I don't know in your personal life if you get many dividends back from your insurance company. I haven't yet, but I just think, and it well-run business here, and we was able to have this surplus. So the recommendation by Ms. Rum and Mr. Fan is a $7.5 million dividend return. Motion made by Sam Tharp. Second by John Holden. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp,
Aye.
Todd Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Reese. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Victor Lay,
Aye.
Mayor Golden,
I want to put you out on Nordica, looking at how you're skiing.
I'm sorry, Mayor Golden, did you say?
Aye.
Correct. Vice Chair Brundage, Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion passed. Okay. Moving on, so item number 5 is covers and rates, fiscal year 2022, Mr. John Calvin. This is your turn here.
Thank you for stepping up. It's great for us. They wanted to move over here so they can see me. I'm not sure why anybody wants to see me. From a coverage standpoint, we had no pressing issues with coverage this year. So we made the decision not to revise coverages, which came to the delight of our claims department, because
they have to deal with anything we do with the forms. And with everything else going on, that just was a blessing that we didn't have anything we had to do in forms. From a rate standpoint, though, it's been a very interesting rate review this year because I think the first time in my being here, we did it as a team, and the members of the executive team started off meeting with our actuaries. And although we didn't do a formal rate review from Price Waterhouse, they were very gracious in giving us some time to talk about all the pieces that go into the study, all the variables that have to be considered, and how the mechanism works. So we were able to take our fall reserve study, which was done by Price Waterhouse, and update the rate study from last year, factor in updates to all our premium and expense and investment into the study, and actually use their tool to come up with a rate suggestion, which was reviewed by the entire executive team, and that came up with this recommendation. So in section 5, you'll see the rate change recommendation. The first thing is workers' comp, which we're recommending a reduction of 9.1% for workers' comp rates. This is kind of catching up with things coming out of the reform of 2014. Those aren't considered in the rate setting until they actually happen, and we're really seeing them happen. So that's an important change for us. The property market is the exact opposite. It's probably our toughest line because our reinsurance costs are so high, and with the storm activity that's been going on, we expect another year of large increases and maybe some retention increases in our property line. So we're recommending a 12% increase, and I know that's on top of a 15% increase from last year, but in the property line, the market is going through the roof, and it's nothing to see 30 and 35, 40% increases in policies. And liability broken down by general liability with a 9.5% decrease, no change to errors and omissions, a plus 8% with law enforcement, and this is mainly due to the last couple of years we've just been kind of hammered in law enforcement. We're optimistic that changes in our culture will make this improve over the next few years. And we've also implemented a lot of training and programs that will impact law enforcement, and we're very optimistic about that line. But right now, we think we need an 8% increase in that line. Auto liability plus 2.7, and auto physical damage minus 4. The combined liability is minus 0.83, so it's almost flat, almost 1% low. And then combined all funds is a 1% reduction in overall rates. If you took the property line out, because it's kind of a problem, it would be a minus 4.7% decrease in rates when you look at liability and comp by themselves. So these are our recommendations, and we're asking for approval to move forward with those.
Okay, we get a motion in a second, then I have a question. Okay, you've heard the report from Mr. Calvin for the coverage and rates fiscal year 2022. Is there a motion for approval? No. Motion made by Mayor Lois Priest, second by Victor Lay. Any discussion? I just got a question, and this is something that I always bring up. I just want to make sure that we are competitive, very competitive, when a private sector comes in to City Hall to talk to whomever city manager is, city administrator, or the mayor. And we get into this situation where we don't like to say it, but bidding things out. And I just, what mechanism do we have in place? And it may be the study that you're talking about, to make sure that we are in line or under and are very competitive in each of these categories. Do we have someone, Michael or John, to take a look at us from the outside, well, and say, "Ooh, you're way too high, or you're way too low, or you're right where you need to be"? Do we have that?
There's a lot of variables that come into play. We have relationships with agents who represent our members, and they're probably one of the best sources we get
Okay.
as far as telling us what the competitors are doing. The problem we run into is that you have competitors that come into the state and they say, we want to take some market share, and they're willing to cut their rates ridiculously low to do that. And usually they don't last because they don't have the money to pay the claims after 4 or 5 years of doing that. So a good example would be a key risk company who has been undercutting workers' comp rates to the tune of 40%. So for us to say, oh, we're going to be competitive with a company like that would be cutting our own throat. We profess to want to have a stable market. We want to have consistent rates. We don't want to take drastic increases or decreases if we can avoid it. And we want to be there when the claims get paid or need to be paid.
And I think you said a key word there, being consistent.
Yeah.
Because right before the meeting started, we just talked about healthcare insurance and how much that some cities, I know mine went up over 30%. With a certain company, I don't say any names, but being consistent is exactly. I think that's something that we need to really toot our horn on, and being consistent where we are, that we're not all over the board. I think our external marketer, Ms. Haley, could certainly reach out to that in our PEP memos that we sent out to customers. But I just, I just think it's our job to make sure that we're doing the best that we can possibly do for public entity partners and for customers who we represent. So that's why I just wanted to know if, and in some of the scenarios that you just said right now, understand why you possibly wouldn't be competitive. But if we're consistent, and of course, I think we all offer coverage second to none. Obviously,
And service.
yeah, and that's right, and services. And the dividend program, and those are things that Michael and I has talked about, and things that we just need to continue to market and hit home every time a memo comes out of this office. Those things have got to be repeated over and over.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, one of the things that our leadership team spent a lot of time talking about and making sure that this message gets out to our members is that when you're in a risk sharing situation, our job is to keep the market stable. And there will be situations where we're not the cheapest game in town, and we're not designed to be.
Right.
But we're designed to stay in town. We're designed to be there when in a hard market situation where the commercial insurance companies may vanish on us. Well, we're obviously going to be cheaper if you can find a competitor at all. But in an extremely soft market, which we're not seeing right now generally, but in a soft, we may not be always the lowest price. And so we have to be able to get that message out as well.
Mm-hmm. I think we all know the lowest is not always the best.
That's exactly right.
That's why I don't really like competitive bidding in government, but it is what it is. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Carr,
Aye.
Todd Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Aye. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Lay.
Aye.
Mayor Holden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage,
Aye.
Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. All right, item number 6, Human Resources Status Report. Ms. Taylor.
Good morning. We have completed our enrollment changes for the 2021 calendar year. We changed over from Blue Cross Blue Shield to United Healthcare for health insurance, as well as changing from HRA to an HSA. And the difference between HRA and HSA, HRA is kind of like you use it or you lose it type situation. It doesn't have to be with an HRA. Generally, the next year you lose any money you didn't use with the HSA, therefore you keep that money. It keeps growing. Our dental and vision plans remain with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We currently have 32 active employees. The ability to recruit and staff has been challenging due to COVID-19, but we have a full workaround. We interviewed several candidates for the East Tennessee Loss Control Consultant, drilled those down and conducted second interviews and a final interview for the East Tennessee Loss Control Consultant. We currently have 2 additional openings. We are advertising for an accounts receivable specialist for the finance department and a claims systems administrator for the IT department. In addition to that, we assist the PRS with timely projects by providing 2 temporary employees to help complete those projects. As Mike mentioned earlier, we have supervisory training scheduled for next week for the directors, for all the directors and our assistant director. Among those benefits, the training will have identified and bridge any skill gaps that we may have. This group is committed to get it right for our employees and for our members. So any training that we need to do internally, we're absolutely committed to doing that. We recognize that our employees are the thinkers, doers, and advocates for our organization. Employee morale is affected at every level of the organization, and I continue to meet with personnel to ensure we are keeping morale at an all-time high level of engagement. Answer any questions for you guys?
Any questions for Ms. Taylor? Okay, thank you. Good report. All right, item number 7 under other business, A, adjustment of public risk service funding. Mr. Fan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll see under tab 7, the second page is that recommendation. Celeste mentioned the difficulty that a number of our departments have experienced in making this transition on our claims management systems from IVOS to Origami. I think Jim Morrison has mentioned that in his report back in September. And we were just then discovering what all amount of work it was going to be. So that has continued. As Celeste mentioned, we provided a couple of temps on some data entry issues to help our claims operation get caught up, or hopefully get closer to being caught up with that process. But that is an ongoing process that's going to take some months to get everything done. So one of the things that we met as an executive team, met with Jim and his systems analyst, and talked about their needs, and what we are recommending is to adjust that was approved last year during the budget process, adjust our expenses toward our claims operation with our public risk services contract by $115,000, such that Jim can go ahead, move one of his experienced supervisors kind of over from a claims adjusting position over into a systems assistant position that will help him get some of these transitions done. And he'll replace that position with a new claims adjuster. You'll notice it says up to $115,000. That would be the annualized amount that we likely will be back for the regular contract in June for the new year. So we won't spend the 115 these last 4 months plus of this fiscal year, but we want to go ahead and make you aware of what that likely was going to cost. And so we just asked for approval to spend up to $115,000 with public risk services for an additional adjuster.
All right, you hear the recommendation from our president and CEO, Mr. Fan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mayor Mike Warner, second by Dr. Krista Martin. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp,
Aye.
Todd Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Priest,
Aye.
Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor Holden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage, Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Motion passes. Item 7B, adjustment to investment policy. Mr. Fan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to ask Amanda to chime in as well. The next, I guess, 4 pages or so is our existing statement of investment objectives and our policies and guidelines on how we manage the portfolio that we have. I think it's the 3rd page back. You're going to see an adjustment that we're recommending listed in red. And I'll kind of just give you the basis for this, or the basics of this. For a number of years, our investment advisor has recommended we make this move. And we've not done that. In other words, what he has asked is the ability in a temporary situation to utilize something less than A-rated security, because of the nature of the yields that we're dealing with, the coupons that we're dealing with, and we've tied our own hands by not being able to at least take a percentage of that down into the BBB and the Baa2 rated securities, which are still investment grade securities on a temporary basis. And so what we're asking, what he has asked for a while, and when Charles was leaving, he and I had a long discussion with Harry about this. He recommended that we really needed to look at it, and so Amanda and I did. We're both in agreement with Harry's recommendation that we allow him this tool that will help us on our performance and our yield. So Amanda, I don't know if that's adequate, or if you want to say anything else about this.
So basically, he kind of foresaw, could kind of foresee just the changes in the market and administration and how this might come into play, because what has happened now, because those AAA agency bonds are getting called away and we're having to replace them with some A, if for some reason that investment gets downgraded, we are in a forced sale position when that may be a perfectly good security that we want to keep, and it will bounce back. It's just for a time period. And so right now, the way the policy is laid out, if we had one of those single A securities that did get downgraded, we would be forced to sell it regardless of what kind of returns we were looking at. And right now we are in a position where we've got more of those single A than what we've ever had in the past, just to be able to keep our yields up. So we want to kind of have a safety net in place in case we do run into that here in the next few months. So, and also there was a requirement that, which from what I've been told, it's been in policy, but not necessarily practiced for a long time, where each security had to have 2 agency ratings. We don't presently have that, didn't have that when I or Charles started doing, started taking this over. But a lot of these organizations don't want to pay because it is a very costly to get rated by one of these agencies. So we have AAA securities in our portfolio that only have 1 rating that we would be forced to sell. So we want to practice what our policy says.
Absolutely.
So we just want to get it upgraded to where we are falling under our policy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have one question. Just clarify for me, who is Harry?
He is our investment broker.
Okay, he's the guy that is
He's the one that I deal with daily, multiple times.
and he's working for
He works for Cruising Associates.
Cruising Associates. Okay, just wanted to get a clarity. What's Harry's last name?
Rosenblum.
Rosenblum. Okay.
Have we met him?
I don't think
He's ever come to it.
Okay. Well, he's done a good job for us.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah. All right, you've heard the recommendation of adjustment. Yes.
So does it, if we want to change the policy, I'm not at all opposed to changing the policy. Do we need to change it to something that's even more flexible? That says that if there is a decision or a need or a situation where the director and the financial CFO, agree that something needs to happen, that they have the latitude to be able to make that decision. You know, I completely understand that we tied our hands and we don't want to do that. We obviously want to be very, very restrained in our investment, very conservative. But from my perspective, we're paying you two to ensure the financial stability of this organization. And if there's a decision that needs to be made, I'm not sure that I would want to set a policy that wouldn't allow me to make that decision.
Russ, have you read the policy that they're wanting to change?
I have not. I'll be glad to look at it.
Do we need to, I mean, I agree with what he's saying, Michael. I've seen you shaking your head. I think you do too.
Well,
If you
I
think
do.
this is enough,
It's not okay.
but
I'll be glad.
I don't want to tie their hands either because.
I understand, but I think that what the issue that Amanda and Harry and I have looked at is that we're in this market kind of now. And so if we need to make it more flexible, that would be fine. But I think we kind of need this piece
Okay.
now.
Well,
It's
I'm in
going
favor of adopting this, but I'm also in favor.
to take a more comprehensive look.
If you all need a more comprehensive look, more comprehensive, more flexible policy, please bring that back. to us. So I want to be able to give you that flexibility.
Okay. Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
A motion.
Actually, I think we've already had a motion. Second. And we were in discussion.
I never made a motion. Nobody ever made a motion. I was about to get a motion and you wanted a little bit more discussion.
And that's the second, our motion.
Motion made by Victor Lay for the adjustment to the investment policy. Second by Mayor Randy Brundage. Any discussion?
Can I ask another
Yes,
question? as
yes.
well? If A security is, if we can see a trend of our A security being downgraded, do we have to do anything to meet that 5% threshold? Are we, for our policy, do we have to change funds around to be less than that 5% holding policy at that point?
Yeah, I think the 5% is that will only be what is allowed to go down into the B.
Yeah.
So basically that we will, if we have an A security that gets downgraded to a B level type security, that we are allowed to keep at least 5% there until we don't normally want to make it practice to invest in B grades. We just want to give ourselves a little cushion in case, you know, something, and like I said, just with more of our investments going to that A, there could be a possibility that one would, and we just don't want to have to be forced to sell. So does that answer?
Well, in practicality, do we risk being close to that 5% threshold?
We have none there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we have 0 there.
And if you'll remember Cody's evaluation, I think it was 14% that are even A.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's a pretty,
the majority are AA right now.
Yeah,
That's
so,
what we
I
want
mean,
to keep.
it's gonna
But
be
still,
almost-
even with it, we still want to keep at least an average of AA in our portfolio.
Kind of goes back to Victor's question, flexibility. I just want to make sure you've got enough flexibility.
Russ, you just read that. Is that pretty next month or next meeting?
Meeting, we can have something for everybody to look at. I'll
Okay,
talk
with
to
some
Mike.
language, yes.
Well,
Okay.
just to give you a little more flexibility in
Sounds
case of an emergency.
sounds good.
Okay.
Ross and I will work on that.
Is there any more discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more discussion? Okay, hearing none. Roll call vote.
Repeat the motion.
The motion was the adjustment to the investment policy.
Okay.
That was the motion, and you heard
Would
discussion.
Okay, with Russ bringing back material, is that?
Yeah, so what the motion is right now is going on the recommendation of Ms. Frum and Mr. Fan has said. Russ, at our next quarterly, before our next meeting, is going to get with Michael and Amanda and see if there's any more language, and then there will be an amendment to that.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
To provide for that
And
flexibility.
we'll get that out.
That's
to the
right.
board well before the meeting.
Absolutely.
So there's a motion and second on the floor. Okay, any more discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp,
Aye.
Todd Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Aye. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Victor Lay.
Aye.
Mayor Holden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage,
Aye.
Chairman Hayes.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Item number 7C, additional funding of a origami transition.
Origami.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't put this with the first one. I put the investment between them, but this really goes with the description that I talked about where we're trying to get public services some additional help. On the adjusting side, the other issue that we have had is we've run out of hours in the agreement that this board approved previously with our contract with Origami. Anthony and John have estimated that we will need an additional 270 hours of work in that programming process. It only goes up to 49,950, which I guess technically we didn't necessarily need to bring to this board, but we just wanted you to be aware that we're still working through that process. It has taken a number of our departments, but especially our claims folks, our IT folks, and our finance folks, a significant amount of work. And so we needed to extend that contract and that expenditure. And so really just as an issue, I felt like since you had approved the original amount, that since we were going to have to go back for some additional dollars, that would present that to you as well.
Okay, is there any questions? Okay, so the motion that will need to be additional funding for Origami transition. Is there a motion? Motion made by Victor Lay. Second by Mayor John Holden. Any discussion? Michael, everybody's familiar with what Origami is, right?
Yeah, that's our claims management system that we've transitioned to. This was a decision that was made a couple of years ago with a number of us had very little opportunity to go through this. And so we have been straightening this transition out. We made the move from iVOS to Origami on September 1, and then we've been working on that transition ever since. And so again, it has been quite a burden, I know, for Amanda and her team, Jim and his team, and Anthony and his IT team. But this is, we're still working through the programming to make sure we don't lose any claims data. Certainly on any new claims that are coming in, that it goes straight into the system. That would kind of work down. Now what we're working on with Origami is basically the transition of old data into the new system. And so that's what this is our claims management system that Jim and his people use to enter all of our claims, and that we utilize to evaluate those claims and study those.
All right, we have a motion and second on the floor. Any more discussion? Thanks for clearing that up for the record. Roll call, Ms. Haley.
Mayor Warner,
Aye.
Commissioner Tharp.
Aye.
Todd Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Priest. Aye. Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Victor Lay.
Aye.
Mayor Holden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brundage, Chairman Hayes.
Aye, motion passes. Other, you got any other?
Yeah, just a couple of things under other. You will notice after that recommendation that you just passed for Origami, the next few pages under tab 7 are our departmental or written departmental reports. As you know, the last couple of years, we have asked our leadership team to present an oral report to this board of their activity and their productivity at the September meeting, and then at the February meeting, you had asked for written reports. And so that's just kind of an update what they've been working on since September. So you've got those reports. Just as a matter of my privilege, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the chairman. We had an event back in January here where even though we were socially distanced and masked, we had a staff meeting. And I want to thank the chairman for coming up. We had, myself included, but we had 3 of us that were kind of being recognized for 35 years of service to this organization. And so, Mr. Chairman, thank you. It meant a lot to our team that you drove down and participated in that. Also want to thank Mayor Brundage and Mayor Priest. They've had me in their city halls in the last few weeks, and I've enjoyed that. So I wanted to thank them for that as well. And while we're on the subject of Mayor Brundage, I think we've got a birthday that we need to recognize. Is that not right?
Yeah. Hey, Randy, I'll virtually eat your piece of cake.
No, wait.
He got his own.
We've got one of our staff members that showed up at City Hall, and
yes, Debbie is here.
we brought him his own cake.
Oh, all right. That's good. All right, join me in singing happy birthday.
I got my cake.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Landis. Happy birthday to you. Hey.
Wasn't enough candles on it.
There you go. There you go. Well, we don't want the COVID cake. We might want to slap.
Thank you.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about that. We get that.
I'll take that back to us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Happy birthday, Mayor.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Any more?
Okay, item number 8, the date be available in the kitchen, please. So, what kind is it, Heather?
Raspberry with vanilla cake.
There you go. Boom.
Thanks for that.
And some of us may get 2 or 3. All right, item number 8, the date of our next meeting will be Friday, June 11th. And normally, and I don't know how much, if it's official yet or not, but normally we're at our TML annual conference, but I know there's been some discussion, and it is now official according to Mr. Haynes. That has been moved to September. Mr. Haynes, you want
17 through 21.
I'm September 17th through the 21st, but we will still need to meet here to pass our budgets and any other business that will come forward. So we will still be meeting here in Franklin.
And if I might, Mr. Chairman, you might want to jot down, since the TML conference has moved to September, that is also, we had scheduled or tentatively scheduled our September board meeting for that Friday, September 17th. We will adjust that now to meet at the TML conference on Saturday morning, which has been our tradition anyway, just for the June meeting. On the 8th, Saturday morning, September 18, and we'll work with Anthony and his team.
Chattanooga.
That's in Chattanooga, yeah. So we'll get additional info out, but just kind of, that will be a change from what we mentioned in December, from September 17th to now Saturday, September 18th at the TML conference. Okay, so you might make a note there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Thank you, Mr. Fan. All right.
No. Quick question. Are you planning for the remodel in North years? Plan on doing that?
We actually do. We've had that conversation over the last couple of weeks. We fully anticipate having a live event Haley, you may know the dates off the top of your head. I'm not sure. Well, I've probably got them here.
So we are still planning for the end of August, I think it's 17th to the 19th, but I'll look and take that.
What was the question?
The risk symposium.
Okay.
Last year, in the social distancing at the symposium, and last year it just wasn't the right call, but all of those measures are still in place, and so we do believe that we will be able to have a very engaging and educational risk and insurance symposium that has safety related to COVID, as well as all the other safety areas that we promoted the symposium. So we anticipate launching registration in April, but we have not put out any preliminary information yet. But we are starting to line up all of our speakers, build our registration site, and get the planning for that underway.
August 25, 26, and 27. August 25 to 27.
That is a great symposium.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
I've been to it. Will that be here in Franklin?
Yes.
And what about?
Marriott, again, is our agreement.
That's Marriott, and we've had several board members attend it. We are reaching out to on business to try to figure out how we can also live stream the event to provide additional opportunities for members to attend. But we've had tremendous support from our membership that have really enjoyed it, and we're really proud of that program.
And we've really had good response from city attorneys too, that have attended.
Yeah. So what about the board of directors meeting by NLC? I know we went a couple of years ago. Are they going to have that? It's
There's still a question. I talked with the NLC risk folks earlier this week. They're evaluating whether they can, they're at least going to do a virtual event, but they're still trying to evaluate whether they can do an in-person piece of that. But both Aaron Ryan and some of the folks at NLC said as soon as they make a decision, they'll let us know. And as soon as we know, we'll let you folks know.
Thank you.
That's typically in April, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I figured they might move it back.
Yeah, they may.
think that there's several.
Well, it may be May.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, okay, is there any other business? Hearing none, we'll need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Sam, second by Mayor Brundage. All for the motion, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
All right,
See ya. Happy birthday, Randy.
we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Birthday, Randy.
Thank you all.